Hospital corridors are always cold and silent, but sometimes in one room, a child's laughter echoes. Today was one of those days for Terry Crews. When Terry arrived to visit the sick children, he had no idea what he would encounter. But as he passed by one of the rooms, a faint giggle caught his attention. Peering inside, he saw a small child lying in bed. His arms were frail, his skin pale, but in his eyes there was an undying light. Terry knocked on the door and stepped inside. The boy lifted his head and looked at him, his eyes widening. "Boy, are you real?" Terry smiled. "Terry, there's only one way to find out." At that moment, he playfully flexed his massive muscles, drawing the boy's attention. The child giggled but was quickly overcome by a fit of coughing. Terry felt his heart tighten. Just then, a nurse walked in and began telling him the boy's story. His name was Daniel. He was only 6 years old, but life had never been fair to him. He was born with a rare illness and had been fighting for survival every day. But the worst part? His family had abandoned him. Daniel had been living in this hospital alone for a long time. Hearing this stirred something deep inside Terry. The child, despite everything life had thrown at him, was still smiling. But Terry knew this battle wouldn't last forever. "Terry, if you're a warrior, you need to train like one." Daniel's eyes lit up. "Daniel, really?" Terry nodded, and at that moment a bond was formed between them. But Terry had yet to face a truth he wasn't prepared for. In the days that followed, Terry visited the hospital frequently. He played games with Daniel, taught him small exercises, and made him laugh. But most importantly, he made sure the boy knew he wasn't alone. One day, Daniel lifted his toy sword and looked at Terry. "Daniel, if I were really strong, do you think my mom would come back?" Terry's heart shattered. The boy still held on to the hope that his family would return one day. How could he tell him the truth? "Terry, you know, some battles can't be won alone, but the most important part of being strong is knowing that the people who care about you are always with you." Daniel fell silent. At that moment, Terry realized just how fragile the boy was. He saw the pain Daniel was hiding behind his smile. But that evening, the doctors gave Terry devastating news. Daniel's condition was worsening rapidly. His body was no longer responding to treatment, and their time was running out. That night, Terry sat in his room, asking himself the same question over and over again. Can I really help him? He had given Daniel hope, taught him how to fight, but the truth was, some battles, no matter how strong you were, could never be won. The light in the boy's eyes dimmed a little more with each passing day. What could Terry do for him? Should he lie? Should he sell him false hope by saying, "Everything will be okay"? No, that wasn't who Terry was. The only thing he could give him was proof that his fight wasn't in vain. When he arrived at the hospital the next morning, he sensed immediately that something was different as soon as he stepped into Daniel's room. The boy was sitting in bed, but his face was more lifeless than ever. His eyes seemed to be staring into a world far beyond this one. Terry sat on the edge of the bed. "Terry, my little warrior, how are you today?" Daniel slowly lifted his gaze. That spark of childlike excitement was gone, replaced by nothing but exhaustion. "Daniel, I think I've lost." Those words pierced Terry's heart like a knife. No, he couldn't say that. He couldn't think that way, because Terry wasn't someone who gave up, and Daniel shouldn't be either. Terry immediately grabbed the boy's hands. "Terry, no! Losing means giving up. You're still fighting." Daniel gently shook his head. He pressed his lips together and looked away. "Daniel, but I'm fighting a battle I can never win." That sentence hit Terry like a punch to the gut. For a few seconds he couldn't speak, because the child was right, and he couldn't deny it. A warrior's greatest truth was continuing to fight even when they knew they couldn't win. Taking a deep breath, Terry squeezed the boy's hands a little tighter. "Terry, you know what? True warriors never lose their battles. Their stories live on forever." Daniel squinted slightly, trying to understand what he meant. But then, Terry noticed something in his hands. The boy was gripping a small notebook tightly. "Terry, what's this?" Daniel smiled faintly, but the exhaustion in his face was so deep that even that smile seemed weak. "Daniel, these are my dreams." Terry opened the notebook. As he turned the pages, each sentence tightened the knot in his throat. "Go to an amusement park, have a dog, have a family, spend a day with my hero." But Terry froze when he saw the name written at the bottom. The last item on the list, Spend a day with Terry Crews. This time, Terry was the one who looked away. Being part of a child's dream. What a responsibility that was, to know that you were the hero in a sick child's eyes, and to know that child's time was running out. He turned back to Daniel. The little warrior's eyes were still locked onto him. Daniel, will you spend a day with me? Terry took a deep breath, placed his hand on the boy's head, and smiled. Terry, I won't just spend one day with you. I'll always be here. But deep down, he knew. The boy's time was slipping away, and Terry, no matter what it took, was going to make sure that Daniel completed that list. That night, Terry Crews made a decision. For at least one day, in Daniel's life, there would be no sickness, no fear, no loneliness. There would only be happiness, and Terry, no matter what it took, was going to make that happen. The next day, when Terry arrived at the hospital, he had a surprise waiting. With the help of a group of nurses and volunteers, he had transformed Daniel's hospital room into a miniature amusement park. Colorful lights, inflatable games, and even a small Ferris wheel filled the space. As Daniel sat up in bed, his eyes widened in disbelief. Daniel, this is my dream. Terry smiled and held out his hand. Terry, and warriors always reach their dreams. That entire day, Daniel never stopped smiling. He got out of bed, played games, laughed with Terry, and ate his favorite ice cream. For one day, his illness didn't exist. But as the day came to an end, his body reminded him of reality. He was exhausted, and in that moment, Terry made him another promise. Terry, this isn't the end. You will always be remembered. And that night, Daniel fell asleep in peace. But Terry wasn't ready to let the day end just yet. He sat by Daniel's bed, watching the little warrior as he dozed off. His breathing was slow, peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, he looked truly happy. Terry, you don't even know how much you inspire me. Terry gently placed a small warrior medal on Daniel's bedside table. It wasn't made of gold or silver, but to Terry, it was more valuable than anything. It was a symbol of the fight Daniel had endured, of the spirit he carried, of the battle he never gave up on. The nurses came in to check on him, and one of them smiled at Terry. Nurse, he talked about you all day. He said you were his hero. Terry looked at the boy again, his heart heavy, yet full. Terry, no, he's mine. He gave Daniel's hand one last squeeze before stepping out into the hallway. He had done everything he could to make today perfect, but deep inside, he knew. He knew this would be the last time Daniel would get to live a day like this. A week later, the hospital called. When Terry heard the news, he couldn't speak for several moments. Daniel was gone, but the hospital staff handed him a small box. Inside was Daniel's notebook. Terry flipped through the pages until he found the last note the boy had written. I lost my battle, but Terry won, because he gave me the best day of my life. Terry's eyes filled with tears, but then he took a deep breath, because in that moment, he understood something. Not all warriors survive, but their stories live on, inspiring others. Terry, there was one more warrior in this world, and I will never forget him. And Daniel's name would live on in Terry's heart forever.